I would agree. I would agree.
Yes.
And she's heard Kara's work and given positive feedback.
Wow,
And it's
that's
just,
very
yeah.
nice.
So
That's
that's
very
how, like,
nice.
I'll never forget, I was in Atlanta in 2018 and she showed me your page and I was like, and that was it. I just, from that moment on, I just was like, okay, I want to know him. I want to know him because I liked your look. I liked
Oh,
your,
really?
yeah,
Really?
you take, yeah, I
It's
liked your
it's
look.
funny. It's funny. The page was actually, you're saying I'm modest. It was kind of like my self confidence as well. I was trying to get myself. I was in a relationship. I was coming out of a relationship. Of like 8 years, and you know, my friend, one of my best friends, was saying we went out. Actually, here in Lisbon, for the first time being single in a long time, and I was getting like attention I never got.
Yeah.
Actually, I would say because and my friend kind of like smacked me in the head a little bit. Said, "Look, you're a decent looking guy. So market a little bit more while you got it. Gonna be like a grandpa soon. So like, go on and do your thing. I was like,
Hell, I'm almost a grandma. I'm 39.
then I kind of like opened up those floodgates and I become,
You
who I am.
did. What also drew me to you was your love of fitness. You don't play any games. You love fitness.
That love is just because it's not really for me. It's not like a vanity thing. It's more of it's a health thing. I have
Yeah.
my father and all his brothers did not make 70 years old.
Mm.
And they were physically fit guys, but they just didn't take care of themselves. They would go to exercise, but then they would drink and smoke as well. And I don't want to end up like them. I have and they had a good chance to live a long life. And then my dad's mom and father lived, into the late 80s and 90s,
Yeah.
so I think it's just because they had a different lifestyle. So I was like, okay, let me just kind of keep my, myself in check, so I don't, another thing that happened is I went to my 20th year high school reunion and it kind of like reaffirmed that because I was like, who are these people? Who are these
Uh-huh.
old folks?
You look like I look young and beautiful. Who are these people?
Yeah, and it's funny because I was such a skinny kid. I was like, I'm still kind of, but like I was really, really skinny.
The perfect size.
Student. And I remember when I was at this reunion, my classmates were saying they didn't, they were asking me if I was someone's husband or, like they said they never seen me before. And I was like, yeah, I was always here. Like I literally missed one day of high school the whole time,
Oh,
So, and
wow.
I was this height since I was 15. So I'm a
Yeah.
tall guy. So it's like, I'm not like, hard to miss, but, I went to a predominantly white high school. So I was
Right.
like, one of, I think, 26 black kids out of
Yeah.
2,000 kids, in the
Yeah.
whole high school. So
Yeah.
it was very interesting that it's like, oh, where'd you come from? It's like, I was always there.
But you know what? It's okay to be the quiet guy. It's always usually the quiet ones that are, and it's so crazy because I'm gonna keep saying it to you this entire time because now I get the opportunity to say it aloud for other people to hear it. But the quiet ones are always the beautiful ones. The nerdy ones are always the ones that grow up and are, these bombshells. I was a nerd myself. I was a real nerd. My glasses were thick and I carried every book. Yeah, I said to you while we were setting up, where's your glasses? Yeah, yeah. I have contacts in now, so
I can't see nothing actually. That's what I'm doing. That's what's making me more comfortable. I see you, but I can't see myself. I'm like, that's a good thing.
Well, guess what? You're doing great. You look great. You got a good energy. You're doing well. But yeah, like it's always the kids that they overlook that grow up and blossom. And I noticed that too. Some kids peak in high school and that's it. I was a late bloomer and you were too.
Same.
We bloomed
Yeah.
very late. So that was actually a good thing because now we get to enjoy, our lives a little longer,
For
enjoy
sure.
beauty
For
a little
sure.
longer, and just enjoy, the beauty of black not cracking.
That's one thing I do thank my parents for. It's like,
Yeah.
thank you. Something like that's crack, but like, I look at my mom who's in her 70s and my father, say he died in the 60s, but he still looked great.
Yeah.
Even with like elements and everything, and even my mother's older sister and my mother's sister's husband is like nearly 90. And
Yeah.
this guy is like, he looks amazing. He's in great shape. I think he could outlive my aunt. She's a little mean. And I'm like, wow, like we have a blessing. Here in Portugal, I'm going to say something kind of shady, but it's not coming from a shady place.
I understand.
The people, especially the guys, are very beautiful up until a certain age. I don't know why, but it's like I call it the transition phase, and then like most guys my age here are just just a different look. It's almost like how Americans used to look. And when someone was 40 years ago, they looked different. They looked older.
Yeah, they looked it.
Whereas I see, now I think that's the good thing about the U.S. I've seen. I mean, I guess we have Botox now, whatever, but I've seen, guys much older than me who look much younger. Like I have a cousin who's like 50 years old. The guy looks 25. I think he's like going to see a surgeon or something. Because there's no way this guy looks. He's not aged since I was not like born.
So with being in Portugal and seeing that there's a different response to you than might have been when you were growing up, whereas people didn't notice you in Portugal, they notice you immediately.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Portuguese on the whole are usually smaller people. Like I said, I'm 6'4".
Yeah.
So I'm already standing out, and then I guess often they would think I'm like there's a lot of Brazilians here and a lot of people from Cape Verde here, and I'm neither one of those. and so they might think I'm from there, but then they hear English come out of my mouth, so they're like, "What's happening?" So it's funny because even just speaking English makes you sexy here. So it's kind of like American English on top of it. Yeah. So it's like, okay, let me just keep talking, even though I'm learning Portuguese now, but it's like I do better than speaking English, if I want to get things done.
Yeah.
Give more respect, I should say.
Yeah. You're 6'4". Wasn't your mother a fashion model?
She was. She could have done more, but my father was very old school and kept her at home. My mom has this. Her story is very interesting. Like at one point, she had her best friend was a teacher who had an issue with his school and got fired. I think he slapped one of his students. Emotional man. And anyway, my mother kind of like secretly like paid his bills until he could get. She says, "You know what? You make my face so well. Why don't you take your portfolio and take it to like Essence magazine and meet Susan Taylor and see what happens?" And so they go to New York and they go just walk through Essence. I guess it was a newish magazine, and this is like in the 70s.
Yeah.
And he came out. My mother was with him waiting in the lobby. He came out and says, he calls my mother Mary. Her name is not Mary, but he calls my mother's friend calls everyone Mary. And he goes, Mary, she didn't like any of my photos, but she only liked one. And it was a picture that he did of my mom. And he says, "Oh, you like this picture?" She's outside in the lobby, and when Susan Taylor saw her, he goes, "Oh my God, you can be my April cover of whatever 1977, and because you're gold." And my mother's very gold, and so he said, "Okay, what not?" She hired my mother's friend, his name was Reggie Wells, and going to Oprah and later, other things, but it was very. She was very excited about that, and she comes back and tells my father. My father's like, "You're not doing anything." It's old school. My father's very old school. He was a very old school guy. Yeah. So he stopped her for a lot of things, but she did a lot of work though. She did do, mainly kind of like mid-Atlantic, Philadelphia, Baltimore, DC kind of stuff. But yeah, she could have. She looks at these young girls now. She says, "Oh, I could have, work rings from Miss Tyra and all these people." Yeah.
See, that's what people don't understand, that they don't understand, such as yourself, beauty is genetic. And, I believe that everybody's beautiful, but in that industry, there are just certain people
Yes.
fit the standards. They fit the standards. It's not, they're not freaks. They're not aliens. They're not, they're not extraterrestrial. They're just a certain standard. So okay, so you mentioned that you get a better response in Lisbon. Do you speak Portuguese?
No fala Portuguese, but a little bit, a little bit. The more I start drinking, I'm just speaking it.
Oh my gosh. So tell me the difference. So you're in New York City, Brooklyn. What's the difference? Tell me the difference.
It's funny being in Brooklyn is such a different place, even in New York City. It's like it's like little villages. That's pretty much all New York City, but Brooklyn especially is like these little villages. And so it's almost like I live in a small town. Like if I'm running late, I have to take the train. I have to usually go the long way to the train so I won't run into people, because people are going to ask, so how you doing? How's your family? How's this happening? And they want to talk, and it's like, actually, I always say, especially where I live in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn, and it's very, very tight-knit community.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's going to change very soon because there's gentrification and people coming in from Manhattan and they don't really speak and whatever. But I do love it. That's what I do love about it. And I am concerned, and I'm part of the problem. Like I'm pretty much selling houses to people who, are coming from, big money from wherever they're from, and they're not used to the culture of, I'm always trying to warn people or kind of give them school them on like how it is to live in Brooklyn. It's because you have all these people from the Caribbean and in the South, and they do the same things they do at home, and so you have to kind of tell folks from places, other places like, if Miss Mary says good morning to you, you say good morning to her as well and ask her how her garden in the back is doing. And,
what I love is that most people, when they think of New York, they think of hustle and bustle. They don't know that there are these gems of neighborhoods. And, in New York, one of my friends lives, I forget where he lives in New York, but literally it was not the New York I knew. Like I would come into Manhattan, and Manhattan is where all the modeling agencies are. And when I was trying to go on the OCs and stuff like that, and then he lived in a place, and it was a Sunday morning, and he's walking down the street, and he's just like showing me his camera, and this looks like a normal, quiet suburban neighborhood, big palatial homes, and I'm just like, wow, this is New York. And he's like, yeah, this is why I don't want to leave. He was like, most people think of New York as busy. This right here is New York. And I'm just like, wow. So I didn't forget my question. So tell me what the difference is in people treating.
The difference is, it really isn't that much difference, actually. That's why I kind of like both places. Of course, where I live in Lisbon it's kind of like it's not the center of Lisbon. It's not the tourist center of Lisbon, but it's more the Portuguese center of Lisbon. Yeah. And it's a bit busier here than it is where I live in Brooklyn, which is interesting. But I do like the pace of it. It's busier, but it's slower at the same time. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all right now, but
it makes sense.
Everything moves slow here. People drive slow. I'm crossing the street, sometimes doing illegal, crosses on a New Yorker, and I'm like, people actually wait for the light to turn red and green and all this kind of stuff, So, it's very, sorry, something I'm going to pop up. It is very different pace. It's very, it's like going to an old world sometimes, here it's like, downstairs from me here is a bakery, and you smell the bakery, and the lady's like, hey, I got some bread for you. I've come home some nights, and in Lisbon, I've seen the sun come up a lot, right?
Wow.
And I've seen the sun come up here more than I have seen in New York, But anyway, I'm coming home, and the lady at the bakery who's been there since the late 40s, she was like telling me like, oh, I have some, something for you, because she knows I'm a little bit, alcoholed up. And so she's like,
She's giving you bread to kind of sop
give
it
me
up
some
in your
bread before
stomach.
I go to bed,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of thing I would do like
If people fit the standards, they fit the standards. It's not, they're not freaks, they're not aliens.